Are replacement refs actually coming to the NFL? Is Ty Simpson really a first round quarterback? Or is this all hype? Italy might be playing the biggest match in their history on Tuesday, and Mauricio Pochettino just told us a lot with his latest US squad. Oh, and the NFL is experimenting with opening night on a different day? Welcome to the Pitch Grid, the podcast that is your home for chaos, clarity, and everything football from the NFL to the global game. Let's head gridside, y'all, and talk about the NFL. And let's start with the replacement refs. So, the last few days, we've seen chaotic statements released by both the NFL and the NFL Referees Association, or the NFLRA, as I'll be referring them to them from now on. And there's a possibility, y'all, that replacement refs are truly in the cards for the 2026, maybe even 2027 seasons, depending on how this goes. There's still a lot of time to go, but right now, the NFLRA has accused the NFL of actually bringing an empty suit to the negotiations. Now, what does that mean? It's basically saying that the NFL basically is trying to make play hardball with these negotiations. They are trying to be purposely hard and not listen to any of the concessions that the NFLRA is trying to give or any of the proposals that they have. According to the NFLRA, they offered a counter to the most recent proposal, which was rejected. They have come to learn that this is a common negotiation tactic used by the league to seek unreasonable concessions, which were quickly communicated. It and basically, all this is because the NFLRA is trying to broker a UCBA agreement, of course. This has been coming for a while, and honestly, the NFL is trying to supposedly up the accountability, according to their recent statement as well, which came out the day after Wednesday's statement, which was by the NFLRA. Yesterday's was the NFL's. Basically, they're saying that they are trying to make sure that the NFLRA is accountable to the league and that they did not bring an empty suit to these negotiations. Right now, negotiations have broken down. Now, what does this mean for the upcoming season? Are replacement refs actually a real possibility? I think this could be possible. Obviously, we have a ton of time left in this till the season here in late March, almost April, and the season doesn't start till September. So you've got a good 6 months. However, let's look at 2012, the last time we had the replacement referees. Honestly, this feels very similar. Now, granted, this was the NFLRA trying to negotiate better pensions for themselves and a better salary overall. This is very different. It's a collective bargaining agreement. It feels like that they're trying to make sure that they want to, have give security to the referees in the union, while the pensions and stuff is just basically fighting over how much they're being paid. So I would argue that this is the finer details, insurance stuff like that, making sure that they have security in their jobs and they're not just being used as tools, or as they would phrase it. And now in 2012, the last time we had the replacement refs, this did not take long to figure out because of how awful the calls were within that season with the replacement refs. We saw the Fail Mary as the poster child for this, and ultimately it took like 3 or 4 weeks before the end of the month before the NFL and NFLRA finally came to an agreement on everything, and the lockout was ended. Now, this is not exactly a lockout. This would be a strike if this happened. Honestly, do we want replacement refs again? Obviously not. I think all of us have flashbacks to that 2012 start of the season. We do not want poor refereeing or poor officiating. We already are quite critical of referees in today's NFL fan environment. And honestly, do you want more controversy around your officiating if you're the NFL? Obviously not. This feels very complex because obviously you want the refs to, be paid fair for their labor and of course, one of the criticisms is they have their own jobs as well. They're not just paid by the NFL. And like some of them are teachers, some of them are they have their own businesses even or they're even lawyers in some cases. It really just depends on who the referee is and what their situation is. So obviously they're still pretty well paid outside of the NFL salary. I believe NFL salary is rather minimal actually for the referees compared to the actual jobs that they hold outside of the NFL. And yeah, we don't want the replacement refs. It could get very ugly though, very quickly because right now the mood is not pleasant between these two organizations, and it doesn't feel like there's a resolution within sight. Now, like I said, we have 6 months to go. However, I don't like the mood around this, and it feels very hostile. And both teams are accusing each other of, you know, very serious things. Let's be honest, empty suits are not a new thing to negotiation tactics in any business or industry. So it's not a new thing. And the NFL is obviously, if this is true, we don't know. It's just an allegation the NFLRA is using to probably get them back to the negotiation table. And they're bringing this public, which I don't think we got much of this public before the 2012 lockout. So does the NFL give in? And we obviously do not know what either side wants. Both are being rather tight-lipped about this. NFL obviously is phrasing this around accountability, trying to use buzzwords that would get people on their side with the statement. Obviously, fans want accountability from the refs. They want to make sure that this is being judged fairly on the field, obviously. And the NFL is playing into that a little bit, I do believe, with how they phrase their statement. And the NFLRA is trying to, you know, make this a PR war. And if they're trying to make this a PR war, I don't think they can win it because the NFL has some great lawyers, some great public relations people. The NFLRA, well, yes, they have great, employees and union members. They aren't exactly well liked or well known and don't have the strings to pull that Roger Goodell and company can pull. So I think we're probably going to see concessions on both sides. I would not be shocked if somehow the NFLRA has to significantly pull back on their side and make sure that you know they concede some things because obviously if they lose this PR war, they're gonna have a lot of egg on their faces. They play hardball, and we get to the replacement refs, which we are gonna talk about later. But the NFL is already implementing rules in place to make in case this should happen, because obviously the league doesn't want a repeat of 2012 and the lockout, and another big difference about the lockout in 2012 versus now, the NFL locked the refs out. This would be the refs walking out on the league. So it's a different story, obviously, in some ways, but in other ways, it feels very similar. And I mean, we're already we're already seeing a lot of criticism around how the game is officiated. We're seeing like virtual measurements because people don't trust the refs in some games to correctly measure, the chain gang and all that. And we're seeing instant replay being used more and more. And obviously, with these rule changes, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago in the podcast, these rules are being implemented for the sake of the referees, where the command center would have to come in and be involved in major decisions like disqualification and stuff like that. I just even if we have these new rules passed, I don't know how much better the game is going to get, and I think the game might suffer for the first month or so, depending on how much progress is made up to the season. I'm sure the NFL would love to have this solved and salted away by the season's start. However, if the NFL is gonna already is also gonna play hardball, I don't know if you're absolutely gonna get that, and it might take the NFL refs walking out and you having to use college refs or high school refs, and man, that would be some chaotic energy for sure because then you know it's going to really feel like in some cases that it's being rigged, and we already have accusations of that already the last few seasons. So it feels like a lose for the league if they don't get this done, but also the NFLRA, if they continue this PR war, could get some egg on their face as well. So it feels like we don't know these demands. That's the problem. If we knew some of these demands, it would feel like we have a bit more context to the situation. However, we don't, and honestly, this could get ugly. This could get bad real fast. Let's move on to the Ty Simpson controversy. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Dan Orlovsky has been riding the horse of Ty Simpson for the last month since after the college football season started and coming into draft season. And the last couple of weeks or so, he's really been hyping up the fact that Ty Simpson could be a first round pick. And even better than Fernando Mendoza, that he should be actually number one overall to the Raiders instead of Mendoza. Now, I think we all can agree that Fernando Mendoza is the consensus overall number one pick because of him being the Heisman. He's a national champion, led Indiana to a bunch of to really good wins in the playoffs. Not to mention he has all the measurables that make him a top quarterback prospect, and especially in this class that is particularly quite weak. And I think we all can agree Ty Simpson's probably number two on the prospect list in terms of quarterbacks in this draft. The other prospects you have right now that come to mind immediately, Garrett Nussmeier, Diego Pavia are the other big names coming out of this quarterback class, and it's a very thin one. And so, could he go first round? Is he actually a first round talent? I think he could go first round. He could. There's not anything saying that he won't. He's had interest from the Jets, the Rams. They have all been in contact with him. The Jets have actually, I think, gotten a top 30 visit for Simpson. So obviously there is some interest there. Now, obviously, the Jets need a quarterback plan beyond just getting Geno Smith in the building. But I don't think he goes number two. And I don't think he's deserving of the number one overall pick as much as Orlovsky would like us to believe he is. And when I watch Ty Simpson tape, I see a very developmental starter with a high floor. He has a lot of the basics down. He has his mechanics down, his processing, his ability to read the field, and his ability to scan and keep plays alive, make sure that he can be a field general should he need to be. However, the finer details on Simpson are lacking. He needs better anticipation. He needs better eye discipline. He needs better timing to me. And he needs a better approach because he can oftentimes get happy feet in the pocket, want to keep the play alive a little too long, and then get rid of the ball, or then scramble or whatever he needs to do. Obviously, in the NFL, you don't have that much time to be able to process as much as you do in college. So the question then at this point is, if these are the concerns, should he go first round? I think I could see him going late first round. I think a lot of people would agree with that. I don't think he's a number one overall pick as much as he has a lot of the right things to say. He had a good pro day. Obviously, a lot of injuries were working against him in the last half of the season, where his production dipped incredibly low. He had around 50% completion percentage, and his stats and his performance on tape shows. In his 15th, that last half of the season is needs to be scrapped. And if he goes to the right system, Simpson, I think, can absolutely thrive. Now, the question is, where would he go? The Rams obviously have a pick in the first round. Could they take him? Maybe. I just think he's more of a day two guy. I really could see him going in day 2, and that would be a much more late first round, early second could be a good place for Ty Simpson to land, I think, because he has upside. He just needs a little bit of refinement, and if he gets the right coach, Sean McVay, for example, they need someone to replace Matthew Stafford after the season probably, and I don't think Stetson Bennett's that guy. Obviously, they don't trust him enough because they want Stafford to come back. So, do you keep the succession plan in place with Bennett, or do you go draft a guy like Ty Simpson that Sean McVay can groom in his image for a year or so and let Matt Stafford teach him a la Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes? Or, I think if he went to the Jets, let's just say because the Jets are the ones that are bandied about right now as the favorites to maybe get Simpson. I think Simpson would die. Plain and simple. I think we all would agree with that. That Ty Simpson would die behind a weak offensive line on a team that, has promise on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively, they're just so not impressive. And if we are to see anything like it was last year with the Jets, you do not want to throw him to the wolves in New York because let's be honest, Geno Smith, I don't think is going to last the entire season. Either he's going to get hurt, or fingers crossed he doesn't because we don't like injuries, but the more likely scenario is he gets benched. And if you're the Jets, you want a quarterback there in place to, in case he does get benched. Ty Simpson would probably be that guy if they drafted him, and I think he doesn't need that. He needs time to sit behind someone who can teach him the ropes. Make sure he can clean up the little things that he needs to clean up in order to become a very good starter. And I think he and Fernando Mendoza are close and are very close to being similar prospects. I just think Mendoza's better. And there's no shading Dan Orlovsky. He has a lot of good tape analysis on a lot of things. I don't agree with all his takes, but on this, I just don't see him being the guy for a number one, because if you're drafting him number 1 overall, he's the guy, and I just don't think he's the guy quite yet. He just needs a little bit of time. Obviously, Clint Kubiak would be a perfect mentor for a guy like Ty Simpson, but again, I just think without a guy to really be the starter there in Las Vegas, it really feels like they're gonna draft a rookie. And I think Mendoza, it just feels more pro. I don't want to say pro ready because that's usually a curse when you label a quarterback pro ready. And usually that's a kind of a death sentence when you label someone like that. But Fernando Mendoza is more ready to start week 1 right now, in my opinion, than Ty Simpson would be. And who knows? We could be a couple of years from now laughing at that and say, "Oh wow, Ty Simpson was just much the better pick." And why were we ever thinking Mendoza was going to be great? Vegas could absolutely suck, and that would be and wherever Simpson goes, maybe they succeed with him at the helm. So it's a very complex process in my head because you want to give him his due for the first half of the season where he looked incredible, but still, I just think he needs to fine tune his some things, and he's going to be fine. Uh, let's get to these rule changes that we talked about and hinted at earlier. Honestly, a lot of these rule changes are simply put small kickoff rules. And what do I mean by that? Well, we have the first one is about the onside kick. We we implemented the onside kick that allowed teams to attempt onside kicks only the fourth quarter when trailing. But last year, the fourth quarter stipulation was removed, and if you were trailing, you could attempt a onside kick at any point. This year's proposal stipulates that we remove the scoreboard stipulation and allow teams any time to onside kick, whether they are trailing, tied, or leading. It bring back spontaneity, though teams will still have to be required to voice their intent and make sure that they tell the referees that they're going to onside kick. So it's not exactly, huge news. It's going to be much more spontaneous, except that they would declare it instead of, lining up and then all of a sudden it being an onside kick, a la Sean Payton in the Super Bowl style. It's just a small tweak to that onside kick rule. And it's kind of also the same thing with the kickoff rule, the 50-yard line kickoff rule. And usually you got a touchback if you bounced it into the zone. Competition committee's proposal this year would eliminate kicking teams incentive to intentionally kick the ball out of bounds when kicking off from the 50-yard line, because usually that's been a loophole to try to get better field position for the defense. Instead, now this would receive a penalty, I believe. And also, kickoff formation, you would have, instead of a minimum of 6 players lined up in front of the restraining line, kind of how we have now with the new UFL style kickoff rules, there would be 5 instead, and you have more people ready to block in your receiving zone than before. So it's a very basic, simple tweak again to a kickoff rule. Now, the rules that interest me more is the player disqualification measure. So if a flagrant infraction is not called on the field, you can have several members of the officiating department in the league center. They could determine before the next legal snap or kick whether the action qualifies as a flagrant violation, and they can have disqualification based on that. Now, that could be huge, considering a lot of people feel like that should be a reviewable offense anyway. Uh, so like unsportsmanlike conduct, something like that. I think it's a very up in the air rule. Like unsportsmanlike conduct is a penalty that you never truly know exactly, and of course, we have the 2 penalty rule for that one. Now, it's interesting that you would get the league office involved instead of just having the officials do it, and of course, this is, I think, also a preventative measure in case there are replacement refs, like we talked about earlier. So, the league office would get involved in case a replacement ref decides to yank someone prematurely and they really don't deserve it. So, the league office would be able to review that before the next snap, say, "Hey, he needs to be disqualified, or he doesn't need to be." Maybe the refs are a bit more lenient, who knows? And they're able to intervene in that way. And also, we did also, speaking of the replacement refs, a new proposal this year for the competition committee seeks to allow the NFL officiating department to correct clear and obvious missed calls that impact the game. So let's just say, for example, there is a failed Mary situation. The league office would be able to come in, swoop in, and fix that call. Say, hey, no, we're not gonna call it this way. Let's review it more. Let's call it this way according to the rules. And then we probably have less of a fail Mary situation. Now, obviously, this would go away probably if, well, it might not, considering maybe if the CBA is locked in before the season starts. Maybe they experiment with it. Maybe they see how it goes. Obviously, these all have to be passed by the competition committee at the owners' meeting, so there's no guarantee that any of these will actually be be actually enforced this coming season. Honestly, I don't really care about the kickoff rules. The onside kick rule is kind of fascinating to me because I I think it would be kind of interesting to see some spontaneity to that, and make it a bit more strategic instead of you have to be trailing. But like otherwise, I don't really care about like the how many. I mean, I guess it could help set off kickoffs better before the kicking team gets into your receiving zone. However, it to me just isn't that important. And I think these extra measures of reviewing plays, reviewing disqualification is important because we have had some weird calls lately in the NFL, but at the same time, it feels like it could be used as a spin against it as well, should it go against some people in big spots. But at the same time, we if we do really want accountability, and we're seeing this in baseball with the ABS system, I think this is a better way to make sure you blend the between all robot officiating and real life officiating because, as I said before, I think the beauty of sports is there is some human error. You're not always going to get the correct call, and you leave it up to chance a bit, and that's kind of the drama of it all. So leaving it precisely to get the call right every time in sports is kind of a big. It takes away from the fun of sports a bit, in my opinion. But I can see why you want better accountability, better more calls getting right more often than not, and, having a cleaner game in general. So, yeah, a more fair game, I should say. So, yeah, I get both sides of it, and I think that's probably the rule that's gonna most impact this coming season, most impact the game. Onside kick rule could impact it as well. I just think having the more comprehensive review system, especially for replacement refs, could be huge. We also got Jackson Smith-Njigba getting a massive extension. It was a 4-year, 168.6 million over 40 million AAV. And honestly, it's very well deserved. He had a great year last season, showed why he's one of the top receivers in this league, and now he's getting paid like it. Obviously, this comes right before the Rams were trying to get Puka Nakua extended. Uh, and getting ahead of that is obviously it's better than what the Bengals did with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It's really smart by the Seahawks, and it's a very team friendly deal. I think that can help them, kind of do what the Chiefs and the Eagles have done with some of their salary cap. John Schneider, I think, is one of the top three GMs in this league with Brett Veach and Howie Roseman. So I think this is a very well done contract for both sides. Smith-Njigba gets his money, and you don't have this lingering into training camp and then the preseason and the regular season. Instead, he's locked in permanently with the Seahawks for a while, and there's no drama around this. And it makes sure that they have their top receiver in the fold with no controversy or minimal controversy. And it's very Seahawks esque how they run the team. They don't really fluff a lot of feathers and ruffle a lot of feathers, or so to speak, and they just get stuff done and make sure that they take care of their own. And that's exactly what they're doing here. And I really like it. I think it's a smart deal to do for sure for the Seahawks. Speaking of the Seahawks, they are hosting opening night, but on a Wednesday? Yeah, that's right, folks. It's because the NFL wants to have the Melbourne game between the Niners and Rams on the Thursday. Of course, traditionally speaking, Thursday is usually held for the defending champ. Thursday night, of course, being the traditional night for, you know, midweek games for the NFL. And they want this Thursday night game to be the Niners Rams in Australia. Obviously, it's the first game in Australia for the NFL ever. So they want to, capitalize on it, make sure that it gets a lot of eyes on it. And they thus put the Seahawks on the day before, on Wednesday, whoever they play. Now, obviously, we don't know who this will be that the Seahawks are playing at home. Obviously, it's their, ring celebration. They unveil the banner, all that good stuff for the Seahawks, and well deserved. But at the same time, it just feels so weird. Like there's nothing like inherently wrong with it per se, in my opinion. Like this is another money grab by the NFL. Like, are we really shocked by that? No. They've done this multiple times. So I'm not shocked that this is how it is going and where it is headed. And of course, we've had the discussion before about Thanksgiving Eve games coming up this season. And of course, Rams Niners was going to be a week one matchup anyway. So this was kind of in the cards potentially. So it's not too shocking. It's just moving it around just is going to feel a little weird. That's all. I think it's gonna just feel a little weird because we're not used to it. We're used to tradition. We don't like a lot of change. And I think that's kind of part of the resistance to this little move by the NFL. And I get it. You don't want a ton of change to a schedule. But at the same time, NFL wants more international games. They're trying to get a new site more eyes on it and more views potentially for a game that has never been done before in a new location. And it's got 2 teams that are division rivals. Obviously, we've talked about the division rivalry aspect and the fatigue and all of that that can impact both of these teams. I mean, if you're the Seahawks, like, this could be a bit of an advantage for week 2 considering you get an extra day of rest than normal for a midweek game, and, it could play out in their favor for a week or so. Who knows? Like, it's not really that important in the grand scheme of things of the NFL season in general. It's just a very weird move, and I think we'll probably if we get more international games, this is probably something we'll see more and more often, honestly. Like, we're already getting talks about more games maybe in Africa or in Asia. Like, there's a game talked about in Tokyo, for example. Like, so we're gonna get more of this, I think, and we just have to get used to it. Unfortunately, for us fans, like, we don't want it this way. Like I said, we are resistant to change, but at the same time, like, this is how it's gonna be, and unfortunately, we just have to get used to it, especially if the league wants to get more money in more areas. And to make it an international game, that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna put the game in more different cities and different venues, and it's gonna become where you probably have an international game almost every week at this point because there's gonna be so many locations that, you're not gonna be able to just have a few weeks like the London series was just 3 or 4 weeks, you had 3 or 4 games in England, and then it was done. Now you've got London, you've got Ireland, you've got Berlin, you've got Madrid, you've got Melbourne, you've got, Mexico City, and so you've got 6 locations already and there's multiple games still in London. So 7, 8 games potentially out of the year. I mean, of course, there's a ton of NFL games, but still, like, just saying, it's gonna become more, especially like I said, if we have a Tokyo game or more games like that, games in Africa, games in more parts of Europe potentially. Who knows? I think we're just gonna see more of this, and I think we're just gonna have to get used to it. The Seahawks, and then how does it impact the Seahawks? We don't know, honestly, but I think it could be a bit of an advantage, give you more rest, depending on how taxing the game is, and of course, early season and all that. Lavonte David announced his retirement this last week. It's a very star-studded legacy, honestly. David retires as the franchise record holder for forced fumbles at 33, fumble recoveries at 21, tackles for loss at 177, while tying the legendary Derek Brooks for the team's all-time leader in tackles at 1,714 tackles. So incredible, incredible stats, making him one of the probably more decorated Buccaneers in terms of defensive prowess, especially, and probably in general, one of the more incredible Buccaneers. He does retire as a Super Bowl champion as well, beating the Chiefs when Tom Brady was in Tampa. Honestly, well deserved retirement after 14 years in the game, being one of the more respected linebackers in the league. Like, you always knew he was going to be around the ball somehow. He was always going to have a presence, one of the better players in that defense for so long. But you could tell that it was getting time to be for him to put down the cleats. At the point like this, Lavonte David is obviously going to be remembered forever by Bucks fans. Going to be one of those icons, I think, that you won't easily forget, and he's definitely gonna always and I think it's really cool as well that he's always stayed with the pewter red. Like, that's really cool to me. I really you really respect a guy that's a one-team guy, and it's not very often you get that these days anymore in the NFL or in college, but respect to Lavonte David, man. What a and not only just a great player, a great person. You hear talk about all the charities he's done, and I believe he was multiple times the nominee for the Bucks, Walter Payton Man of the Year. So, yeah, the guy is great in the community and with other people and as a player as well. So hats off. Hopefully he can find some peace in retirement I've talked about it before on the show how I really hope that the retired players are taking care of their mental health. They have a backup plan in place because football's only a temporary thing, and they have their families to take care of still, and, of course, they're set for generations with the money that they earn, but still, mental health is a real thing, and not having something to do, you hear so many players talk about how they need something to occupy themselves after they're done with the game, and it's hard to not squander all the wealth that they've accumulated as a player doing weird stuff or getting into shady business deals or whatever. Hopefully, and I don't see Lavonte David being one of those people, but still, it's the ones you least expect sometimes, and hopefully he's able to just go out there, have a peaceful retirement, enjoy his time with his family, and just enjoy having done a great service for the fans of Tampa Bay. And now, with all that out of the way, let's head to world football. Let's head pitch side. Talk about some big news that came out this last. We had a couple of huge players leaving their clubs. Mo Salah, one of the iconic Liverpool players, not of just recent memory, but all time. And if you look at stats, he is officially going to be leaving Liverpool after the season is over. Obviously, we still have a month and a half or so till the end of the season, and Liverpool announced this last week. The legacy with Mo Salah is quite interesting, honestly. It's complex to me in a way because we see the player, the talent has been undeniable the last few years, especially last year. You saw how incredible of a talent he is, and on the pitch, and how he can create and craft goals and assist with his simple pace and ability and the magic of his boot. And and this year it hasn't been nearly that. I say complex because while you have all the magic stuff on the field, off the pitch, it has been rather there has been times of turmoil for Mo Salah. Multiple times he has gone out on done interviews complaining and trying to get his way via that, and it's ruffled a lot of feathers. We, of course, had this very scenario happen earlier this year when he was not happy with how he was not playing enough minutes in the Liverpool squad, and obviously they fixed that by having him play more often. And I think obviously those concerns never went away because he's being released after the end of the season. So obviously there is still some concerns on his side, I think. And to have that kind of player who just goes out and does interviews to get his way, make it a PR battle and a PR issue, kind of makes it a bit more tainted on him as a person, and it makes you kind of think, and it's not always great when you have a player that, you love watching and love rooting for as a fan, but at the same time, he can ruffle feathers. He can, really frustrate you when he's not as good or not on his game, and then it comes out that he's kind of frustrated with the team in general, and it wasn't just at Liverpool, it was at Chelsea too, I believe. So yeah, it's a bit murky. Obviously, he's a bit temperamental, but at the same time, he's got such great talent that you can't ignore it at all. Now, interest in him is always going to be there. Already, there are reports that he could be going to MLS. Inter Miami is one of the teams very interested in signing Salah. Obviously, that would be incredible having him and Messi on the same pitch in the same team colors. Also, of course, there is the Saudi rumors, of course, are gonna be there. He was rumored to go there in the summer, and they had worked up a deal, I believe, with Al Ittihad a bit to have him go there, or Al Nassr, one of the 2, and it fell through. But, I mean, those are, I think, 2 interesting options. Obviously, it'd be very interesting to see him come onto US soil, play in MLS. Him playing for Inter Miami would almost be a cheat code, honestly. Having that good a team, my word. And I think San Diego's the other team in MLS interested in him as well. That would be a fun combination with him and Chucky. And and Alonso as well. So I could see it would be really cool to see him in MLS, but I don't know how much juice he has left in the tank. It might be a couple more years, but it would be really interesting to see where he goes in the summer. Antoine Griezmann is also leaving Atletico Madrid, and he will be joining Orlando City on a permanent transfer in the summer. Orlando is not in a very good position right now. Of course, it's early doors, but they're in the lower half, near the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings right now. And this is a team that has been rumored to be very interested in Griezmann, and Griezmann has been very interested in coming to the States. He loves the United States. He loves American football. He loves baseball. He loves American culture. There were rumors a couple of years ago that Antoine Griezmann was going to sign with Sporting Kansas City. And, he was even at Sporting Park, Children's University Park, and visiting with Patrick Mahomes. And I think it was because Sporting might have had his discovery rights at one point or another. I can't remember for sure. But honestly, like him coming to Orlando makes a lot of sense. It's a city where, he could it wouldn't be a ton of distractions for him, but it would still be somewhere where he could be prominent, be a huge focal point for MLS, and another iconic player coming to join the league. I mean, if Mo Salah came, that'd be another Infinity Stone into the gauntlet. You already have Sung Min, you have Marco Royce, you have Thomas Mueller, you have a lot of great players from our generation when we were younger coming to the States and playing in MLS. And now another one's coming in, Griezmann. Obviously, he's going in the summer because he can't play right now in the summer, and you're not allowed to you know, permanently transfer somewhere, not in the summer or winter deadline windows, and those have passed a long time ago in January and August and September. So right now, of course, with it being MLS transfer window open, they can sign him. Orlando can sign him, but he can't go there yet. He still has to play for bleh, Atletico Madrid for the rest of their season. Obviously, they want him to stay. They want him to compete in Champions League and help them qualify. Well, not qualify. Help them advance further in the competition there, as he's one of their best players. Now, like I said, Orlando is at near the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings. Is he a does Antoine Griezmann make Orlando City a contender immediately, or is this a long-term play? In my opinion, I think this is a long-term play. I Orlando right now is in a bit of a flux state. They just replaced Oscar Pereira as their coach. He was their original coach when they came into the MLS, and they're in a bit of a flux state right now. They really aren't playing that great, and they need some direction, and they need someone to kind of help lift the spirits. And I think Griezmann is kind of he's going to be the centerpiece that Orlando builds around. Like Inter Miami's building around Messi, and LAFC's building around Sung Min, for example. This is the centerpiece that Orlando City will build around. And I think also, it's like Will Saha as well as Charlotte. They're building around these key players and making sure that they complement these key players. And you're not going to know how that works until they're there, until you see them in your system and where to play them. And right now, Griezmann is not there, and he's not going to be until July, June or July. So, going to be a few months, but Orlando, if they are able to like somehow turn their form around, and of course it's early doors in MLS, so anything can happen. But if they're able to turn the form around, maybe get themselves top half of the conference, if you can, of course, playoffs being ninth place and up. So if you can get around or hover around ninth place, if you're Orlando City, maybe they are somewhat of a surprise contender come the playoffs. You just really don't know. And I think that's the beauty of having this kind of a transfer. He can absolutely save a season. And of course, in MLS, you don't have relegation, you don't have promotion, so there's no really risk to him coming. But at the same time, like if Orlando can just improve their form, maybe they're able to make a deep run in the MLS Cup playoffs. So there's upside to both sides. I just think this is more of a long-term play, able to build around him and make sure that Orlando might be a long-term contender once again in the Eastern Conference. We had some great UEFA qualifier playoffs yesterday for the World Cup. I made a post about this yesterday. We had some great games going on yesterday in UEFA and in the World Cup Intercontinental playoffs that were held in Monterrey, Mexico. And man, this was so good. We had a lot of good games. We had teams that dominated, like Denmark and Sweden. Denmark winning 4-0. Sweden beat Ukraine 3-1. And we also had teams that pulled off shocking comebacks. Poland was down 1-0 to Albania at the half, and then they turned around with 2 unanswered goals and made it a 2-1 game, and Albania just kind of fell apart late in that game, and they were not able to recover despite how they were able to play in the first half. So, you get Poland and, you know, Lewandowski coming back to a playoff final, and, if one more game now, they can qualify for the World Cup. And, you have the likes of you had Italy surviving another game. They were 0-0 at the half with Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland had some chances, but Italy was able to dispatch them in the second half, win 2-1. And then we had the crazy games. In Turkey, Romania, Turkey was able to win comfortably 1-0 in a rather boring game. It wasn't much to talk about besides the one goal. Then you get to the crazy games. Probably the game of the week in terms of goals and the incredible goals that were scored. It was just fantastic to see Slovakia and Kosovo go back and forth in Bratislava. Slovakia took a 2-0 lead. Kosovo was able to come back and equalize it. And then they took a 4-2 lead. David Strelic of Middlesbrough was able to pull one back in the late closing stages for Slovakia, but it wasn't going to be enough as Kosovo, the tiny nation of Kosovo, is able to advance to a playoff final and be one win away from a World Cup for the first time in the history of the tiny little country of Kosovo. So hats off to them. That was a fantastic game. And then we just had some crazy games between Czechia, Ireland, and Wales, Bosnia, Herzegovina. Let's start with Czechia, Ireland. Ireland hasn't been to the World Cup since 2002. Ireland, the last time they were close to getting back to a World Cup, they were beat by Czechia. Well, Ireland went up 2-0 really quickly early in the first half. But then the tide kind of turned a little bit because Czechia scored within 30 seconds after Ireland scored their second goal, made it 2-1, made it a cagey affair, headed into the second half. And Czechia was eventually able to find the equalizer. And Ireland was just not making their chances count when they had them. And it kind of just the same way in extra time, and then they went to penalties. Ireland led in the penalty shootout at one point, and then Czechia was able to clutch up, come back, and Ireland choked it. They fall 6-5 in penalties and are eliminated once again from World Cup contention. And it's just brutal because it's a very similar story for Wales because they were up 1-0 on a Dan James screamer goal and in the second half, and it looked like they were going to just dominate and make this a comfortable win, even though they were not hitting their chances. They missed a lot of great chances to double their lead and make it a game where they would easily could have been 4-0 now. Also, in Bosnia and Herzegovina's defense, they also had several good chances that they missed as well, and they also could have had several goals, but they didn't. They also were. It looked like they were going to ruin their chances to even equalize until the 87th minute when Edin Dzeko equalizes for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Sends it to extra time. Wales dominates the vast portion of extra time, has another few chances to go up. They do not make those count. And then Bosnia has their first penalty saved. So it really looks like Wales is actually going to pull out with a win out of all this and make their dominance count. But then they missed two straight penalties. They have one saved and one just absolutely skied by Brennan Johnson as he was leaning back way too far. And Bosnia Herzegovina win 5-3 on penalties. And these are just two teams in Ireland and Wales that really just were left to rue their chances. And they it's so devastating for these fans because they played so hard and so well, both of them, for vast portions of these games, and yet we're not able to make it count. And that's honestly, it's the beauty of playoff football. The small moments, the tiny missed chances, the missed opportunities to score when you think you can, and if you don't capitalize them, you're gonna rue it. And they both found that out the hard way, unfortunately. And now it's the second straight penalty shootout that Wales has lost to get to a major competition. They lost to Poland on the penalty shootout to qualify for the Euros, and then this year they lose to Bosnia and Herzegovina, who are now one game away from a World Cup. If Bosnia were to make it, it would be the first time in quite a while, I think since the '90s or early 2000s, that they have made a World Cup. So now we have our playoff matchup set. We have Italy versus Bosnia Herzegovina, and we have Sweden versus Poland, Denmark versus Czechia, and Turkey versus Kosovo. And looking at this right off the bat, you can never discount Italy. But is this Italy's potentially biggest game in their history? Because right now they've missed two straight World Cups. They have one game left. If they win it, they go to a World Cup, and they completely redeem themselves after a rough couple of years, a rough couple of qualifying cycles, I should say. They have an aging roster for the most part, kind of just the it's a really a damning kind of evaluation of Serie A at this point. But it's true because their roster is aging and they really don't have a ton of youth. So this feels like Italy's best chance to qualify for a World Cup for a while. And they're facing a Bosnia Herzegovina team that will not let them go quietly, I think. I don't think right now you can discount Bosnia Herzegovina. I think you have to pick Italy unless proven otherwise. I think Bosnia, though, could cause them quite a few problems. And if they're able to frustrate Italy a little bit, I think Bosnia could win it. Sweden versus Poland. Well, Sweden has some good attacking talent, but Poland just feels like the more complete team at this point. So I'm probably going to say Poland makes it. Denmark, Czechia, I think Denmark is much the superior team and should win this. However, we saw with Scotland that they can bottle things if they need to. I mean, if they are able to, and this is a Denmark team that wants to go back to the World Cup, and this is a great opportunity too. They have an opponent in Czechia that they should be able to beat comfortably, and I think they will. Turkey and Kosovo, Turkey. It feels like Turkey should win this, right? It feels like it. They've had more recent big competition experience, having that great run in the Euros. And yet, at the same time, I kind of think Kosovo could win it. Kosovo put up a great fight against a, a Slovakia team that has a lot of firepower and was scoring a lot of goals and honestly almost automatically qualified for the World Cup in their group, but just fell short after slipping up a couple of games. And Turkey, like, it's kind of same thing with them. They have the firepower in Turkey, but Kosovo just seem to have that magic sauce. They're one game away from going to their first ever World Cup. I would not be shocked right now if Kosovo went. I would not be shocked at all. But it seems like a tall task, and I kind of think Turkey is going to go to the World Cup. So to recap, I think it's going to be Italy. I'm not convinced by it. Poland, Denmark, and then again Turkey. I'm not convinced by that one either. But I think they're all going to be some great games. And obviously, playoff football is just the best. It's unpredictable, and you never know what's going to happen, what drama can happen. Any team can win at any time, and it's honestly going to be. be a mirror of what the World Cup's gonna be like. Yesterday was absolutely insanity because you had all the games on at once, and it was like it's the soccer version of Sunday Ticket, where you have all these games on multi-view, you're keeping track of all these scores, and it's insanity all at once because you have goals coming in left and right, and it's just the beauty of knockout football, man. You just love it, and I know not a lot of people get why soccer is so good. Just watch yesterday's game, and I think you would get part of why. It's so awesome and so much fun to watch because you can have chances, opportunities, and great tackles, and the drama is there, the intensity, the passion of the fans is all over the place. It's incredible, and I think it's gonna be so cool. The best games from this last round, I would have to say definitely are Slovakia, Kosovo, and Wales, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Czechia, Ireland. Probably the best games of this week, and I think it would be really fun, like I said, to see Kosovo make it. I think it would also be kind of interesting to see if Bosnia made it. Now, that would be cause the mass chaos result because if Italy were to lose this match with Bosnia, there's a lot of implications, not only just for the national team. Like I said, they don't have a lot of promising youth prospects coming up in Italy, but also for Serie A and what football looks like there for a while in Italy. So there's a lot of implications here to be had in terms of what happens in these final games that will be on Tuesday. And then, of course, we had the games of in the Intercontinental Playoff where we had Bolivia Suriname. Suriname took an early 1-0 lead and then just absolutely collapsed. Bolivia was able to change their strategy in the second half after the first goal by Suriname, and credit to them, they were able to make the right substitutions. Suriname did not adjust, and Bolivia scored 2 quick rapid fire goals to give themselves a lead, and Suriname, though they had chances, just never were able to come close to equalizing it, and thus Bolivia advances. Suriname would have been the lowest ranked ever country to qualify for a World Cup if they had won these 2 games. This one and then against Iraq, who Bolivia will play next. And then we had North Caledonia and Jamaica yesterday. It was rather straightforward. Jamaica got an early goal, and after that, nothing really happened. Jamaica had a lot of chances, just were not able to capitalize. North Caledonia had a couple of they had a couple of chances. They had ones from halfway line a couple of times where they tried to chip Andre Blake, the Jamaican goalkeeper. And one almost caught him out. The second, really, he was much more prepared for. But after that, it really, you never felt like North Caledonia really threatened a ton. And Jamaica moves on. And as a result, they will play DR Congo on Tuesday as well. So now we have our matchups as well in the Intercontinental Playoff for the final 2 spots, and that would be DR Congo versus Jamaica and Bolivia versus Iraq. And honestly, as much as I admire Bolivia's fight back, I think that Iraq has played so well in Asian qualifying. I think they're gonna just edge this one out. And Jamaica versus DR Congo, watching it, Jamaica were good. North Caledonia was not that impressive. You could tell that there was a vast disparity of talent there. I just think DR Congo, watching it, you could tell Jamaica was not good. Is not was not on their game, and I think DR Congo could really take them out of it. So I think DR Congo is also going to advance to the World Cup. And after Tuesday, we'll know our entire World Cup field. So it's going to be really cool to see as well. Let's move really quick to English football and talk about how Man City, they absolutely dominated the EFL Cup final against Arsenal. They won it 2-0. Nico O'Reilly scored a brace. And Man City never looked out of control. Arsenal never really threatened either. And what does this say about Arsenal? Honestly, like, it feels like they are probably gonna win the Premier League. I don't think there's much doubt about that. They've built themselves a big enough cushion that it's gonna be hard, especially with how inconsistent Man City have been in the Premier League. to actually be able to catch up to Arsenal unless Arsenal have a massive meltdown, and I can't see that happening with less than 10 games to play. I just think somehow when the lights get brightest, Mikel Arteta tends to be like his mentor Pep. He tends to tinker where he should not tinker and make things adjust where he should not make things adjust. And it's a trade for Pep Guardiola at Manchester City as much as he has his incredible traits. That is one of his big faults for Pep Guardiola. He tweaks his tactics way too much, likes to think he's a better genius than he actually is, and it's kind of, I think, rubbed off on Mikel Arteta, who is, of course, a pupil of Pep Guardiola. And honestly, student and pupil, you're going to get kind of similar traits, except different thinking styles because they're different people. But you can tell that trait of Pep kind of rubbed up off on Mikel Arteta because they have not won a major trophy since 2020. Now, obviously, if they were to hang on and win the Premier League, they would have a major trophy, and it'd be a huge lift for Mikel Arteta and Arsenal to get a major to win the league. Not only that, but a major trophy. But to win a cup would have been even better for them. Obviously, they're still in the hunt for the Champions League. They can still win that, but it's not going to be easy at all. And I think you're going to see this is going to still be tough. And are the lights gonna be the when the lights are brightest, can Arsenal shine in the Champions League? And that's the question we have to see going into the rest of the season. Tottenham Hotspur lost a huge six-pointer to Nottingham Forest. Tottenham are staring down the barrel of the relegation zone. They're only 1 point above West Ham. Even they do have superior goal difference to West Ham, but right now they're just in a rut. And Nottingham Forest looked dominant in this game. Tottenham had nothing going forward and looked uninspired. They did sack Igor Tudor again. They sack another manager, and it just feels like pandemonium is loose. Now, I think they could save it. They could save it depending on the manager they get. If sacking Igor Tudor is kind of a interesting way to have things right before the end of the season. Of course, they want to be safe. They don't want to go down to the championship, and it just feels like though that these players are hugely responsible, and changing the manager is not going to do much for them. If West Ham can just get a couple of results, that's been the problem lately. They've been in a little bit of their own rut. So it's right now, I think it's down to Tottenham and West Ham who are going to be relegated, I think. Because Nottingham Forest and Leeds, I think, are doing enough right now to say, oh, they can save themselves potentially. Leeds have the easier fixtures. I do think they're going to be safe. I think they need like 4 points to be safe. So it's getting close. Of course, the tide is rising. There's less room for error now. They have very few games remaining, but still, it's going to be such a crazy run in come the end of the season. What's behind Chelsea's inconsistency? They lose again, and in embarrassing fashion too, to Everton 3-0. And I don't. In one week you have Chelsea that looks dominant in the Premier League. They look solid and they can win easily and comfortably. The next, they're drawing or they're losing to some team that they should not be drawing or losing to. And especially in a European race that is so tight now because Everton is now right on their heels along with Brentford. You can't be losing these games, these 6 pointers, European 6 pointers, to teams that are trying to chase you down. And right now, Brentford is not taking advantage of these results, but there has to be something to be said about the tactics being run because at the start of the season, it felt like Chelsea was going to be a top two, top three team in this league with how they were playing. They felt much more consistent. Yes, they had a lot of red cards, but at least they were playing somewhat decent. They weren't staggering weird results after weird results and cobbling in some wins here and there. And I just don't know what to say because Liam Senior, I really have a lot of faith in him. He is a young coach that I really like. I wanted Middlesbrough to hire him when Middlesbrough was looking for a coach, and yet it just feels like he's kind of overwhelmed by the Premier League. It feels like his tactics, while they've worked at so many different places, are just not working in the Premier League. And Also, I do think there is part of this is Chelsea does not have a great defense. Their back line has been horrid again and again, and they're making the same mistakes over and over again. So I think this is definitely something that Chelsea's going to have to address if they are to want to compete for Champions League. They want to compete for the Premier League title. So I think that's something that we're definitely going to see them address come the summer transfer window. And Brentford, like I said, will they take advantage of this inconsistency by Chelsea? Right now, they're not. If they were to get a couple of wins, though, when Chelsea kept this kind of weird form up, I would absolutely see it for sure. And also, really quick, wanted to shout out the Ty Weir's derby was this last week, and Sunderland was able to have a great comeback, down 1-0 to Newcastle, and able to have a last minute winner by Brian Brobby to pull out the 2-1 win in the huge derby match in the Northeast. So kudos to Sunderland for pulling that out, and they're right back in the European race once again. It looks slim chances for them, but still, they're right there with Brentford and Everton and others. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens from there. Let's go to the EFL Championship real quick. We had everything pretty much stay put for this last fixture of games. Borough were able to draw, only able to draw with Blackburn. Ipswich and Millwall, a huge game at the top of the table, also ended up in a draw. Very weird 1-1 draw. Ipswich looked like they were the better team for most of this game. Millwall had their chances, they just never took them, and were able to find the equalizer late through Josh Coburn, but and that's the best result probably for Middlesbrough, but Millwall were not able to find the win. Like I said, this is probably the best result for Middlesbrough in terms of keeping their automatic promotion hopes alive. It sets up a huge, massive game on Good Friday with Millwall, and right now, uh, they are Millwall and Middlesbrough, of course, right now are I think, two teams that are right now neck and neck for who could challenge Ipswich the most. Ipswich right now is in a weird run of form right now, as is Borough. Middlesbrough, I think this all could be solved if they just get a couple of goals. I really do. If they see a couple of chances go back in the net, in the back of the net, I think that Middlesbrough is going to go back to the form they were in earlier last month. And if they are, that's scary coming into the last run in of games. But they need to find that goal, the goal that can really spark that. And they just haven't been able to find it. A lot of goalless draws and last minute. Of course, it felt like if they had won the Bristol City game, I think they would have had a ton of confidence. And that equalizer really hurt them, I think, in terms of confidence for a bit. But Middlesbrough are getting healthy again. They might have Hayden Hackney back and in time for the Millwall game, which would be huge because, of course, they have the international break right now. So they're going to have a little bit of a reprieve. They did have several players, including Aiden Morris, called up. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. We're going to talk about him in a minute. But, you know, the automatic promotion race is so tense right now. And it feels like no one is willing to blink. Who's going to blink first is the big question. Ipswich is coming into a tough stretch of games where they have Birmingham, they have Norwich, Southampton. So this is going to be, and of course, Middlesbrough coming up. So this is going to be a very tough stretch of games. And who's going to blink first? Millwall, Borough feels like the first domino to fall in that promotion race. West Brom are starting to see their safety prospects brighten up, while with a couple of huge wins, including one against Sheffield United, and Pompey, meanwhile, suddenly back to being nervous. They're only a point off. They're only a point above Leicester City. Meanwhile, Leicester and Oxford are just trying to escape, but they can't seem to. Leicester feels particularly scared at this point, and honestly, this would be a huge, massive collapse by Leicester if they were to just not get out of this. And right now, it feels like no matter what result they can get, they just aren't seeming to figure it out. And it's just so frustrating for them because they really are, just bottling some results, including a 1-0 lead that they had against QPR and then lose 3-1 as a big example of that. And of course, the Southampton game where they we're up 3-0, then lost it 4-3. It's just crazy to think that this is the position that Leicester City are in. But right now, Pompey's just trying to keep their head above water. This relegation battle is just getting more and more fascinating with 8 games to go, really. And you really can't pick, I think, between Pompey and Leicester and Oxford. Right now, West Brom are starting to pull away a bit. And I think if they get a couple more results, they're probably going to be safe. Which would be huge because only a few weeks ago we were talking about them being in a hopeless spot. But getting the change in manager has really helped them, and they've definitely got this new manager bounce going. So that's definitely going to help them, I think. Maybe just push them over the line. And of course, with with Bloomfield, it felt like he was going to help Oxford escape, and they're right back in it again. And they just can't seem, no matter what results they get, can't seem to get Leicester or Pompey to move. So it feels kind of hopeless for all these 3 clubs. But right now, it does feel like this is the relegation zone with West Brom being on the tip of it, as well as Blackburn. But right now, it feels like it's down to those 3 to who could get relegated. And honestly, are we starting to see the run in, just the pressure of the run in break teams? I think so, honestly. You're seeing a lot of tired legs, a lot of tired minds, and getting weird results at the top of the table where teams from the lower half are getting results against them where they weren't earlier in the season. And of course, you're seeing teams like Bristol City collapse. We just saw them sack Gerhard Struber today and replace him with a new manager, and man, it's crazy that they're even that Bristol City were doing that when they were considered a hot topic for playoffs. And I just could not have imagined Bristol City second Gerhard Struber after being in the playoffs or in and around the playoffs for so long, because this was a team that just felt like a right team after last year making it into the playoffs for the first time in a while, and they're right back to their traditional place at 12th. They're 12 points from the playoffs right now, 11 points from the relegation zone. It almost feels perfectly balanced, as all things should be, as Thanos once put it. Roy Hodgson, by the way, is taking over the job at Bristol City. Former England manager is taking charge there. Who knows? That was not something I had on my bingo card for sure. I think with a run in, you just get to this point where pressure gets to everyone and the tired minds, you just have to really focus in. It's easy for us fans to say because we're not experiencing the difficulties and the strains of the season that the players are. But still, it feels like a mentality thing at points. And it also is just conditioning and fitness and all that. And it's such a difficult balance. All right, let's back to MLS. Who's actually the hottest team in MLS right now? Nashville or LAFC? Both are on 13 points, 4 wins and a draw. They have not lost yet. And honestly, these 2 are incredible teams. Mm, you have Sturridge scoring a hat trick every other time you look up and watch and see a score line. You see, you know, you see Son Heung-min and company just absolutely nailing teams whenever they play them, and it doesn't feel close. All over the place. It just feels like these are the 2 best teams in this league right now. And you would have thought Inter Miami would be there. They've had a slow start. They're getting there again, though. And, they're right behind at 10 points right now, Inter Miami is. But right now, just man, Nashville and LAFC just look so good. Of course, it's early windows. Nashville always finds a way to slip up when they feel like they're in control and they're cruising. But at the same time, LAFC has also been here before. Who can sustain this the longest? I think if Nashville can stay healthy, I think they can. And I think LAFC can too. But they have a bit more like other contenders right behind them in San Diego and Vancouver. Besides Inter Miami and maybe New York City, who I don't think is can sustain this run that New York City is currently on. I really think Nashville has less contenders around them besides maybe Inter Miami, and they actually played them in the CONCACAF Champions Cup and looked pretty good. So against them. So I think Nashville's actually kind of built perfectly to counter Miami. And of course, you can't count Miami out at any point because they're that good. They're that talented. and they will probably win the MLS Cup. Watch them do it. But right now, it's fun to see a Nashville team that is really fun. Sam Surridge and Hani Mukhtar and company just really and Christian Ramirez. They're all looking so good and in sync right now, and it's really fun to see for them to actually back up a season from last year where they actually won the club's first major trophy in the U.S. Open Cup and almost and are competing in a lot of goods in a lot of competitions right now. So that's really cool. We saw Cincinnati escape Montreal in a high scoring affair with a win. That was huge for them. But Philly just can't buy a win right now. They are still winless, the only winless team in Major League Soccer right now. And it's crazy because this was a team that won the Supporters Shield last year. It's just crazy how 1 year can just change everything in an organization. It really can. Losing a lot of your best players to different leagues and overseas and all that is just really messing with Philly right now. And the West, bottom of the West is actually kind of congested. You're only like a if you're sporting Kansas City right now, who got pummeled by Colorado Rapids over the weekend 4-1. They're only 2 points off the playoffs, and of course that says a lot about MLS. I'm sure you'll hear a lot of people say that, but I feel like it's also kind of just the level of competition right now. At the start of the season, it's starting to kind of form. And you're still not really going to know who are the good teams, who are the bad teams, and you're kind of trying to figure out on a level playing field who that is. And right now, we aren't quite sure. So I think we're going to really see in about a couple months who really are the good and the bad teams. Of course, Sporting KC is definitely gonna be one of those bad teams, but their owner has already come out and said they're gonna spend a lot of money, so this is gonna be really fascinating to see how they adjust their roster. They've already gotten a couple of new signings in as well that could really help them. So, um, and Atlanta United also, by the way, got a nil-nil draw at DC United. They it was kind of a boring game, to be honest. Atlanta dominated most of it. DC United did not look like they wanted to be there, but still they were able to pull out the draw and get a point. So, kudos to them, I guess. It was a really weird game. But yeah, that's MLS right now. Let's head to the US men's team real quick. And the latest squad just dropped and we saw a lot of good names drop in here. We saw Roman Sanrotaro from FC Cincinnati come into the squad as a goalkeeper. Matt Freese, of course, he's one of the top keepers in the system. And of course, Matt Turner, the reliable vet. And then you have, your Max Arsons, your Mark McKenna, your Tim Reams, your Chris Richards, your Anthony Robertsons, your Miles Robinson actually got it. We were talking about him with Abe Gordon a couple of weeks ago in the interview whether or not he could get into the squad. He didn't make it for these couple of friendlies over the international break against. And so this is really going to be really cool. Joe Scully, I love that one as well. Austin Trusty also getting in is really good. We saw Sebastian Berhalter get in. The one huge interesting little omission here is Haji Wright from Coventry City. He was not listed in the squad, and which is really interesting because he's on fire right now for Coventry City. And I thought he would really be one of the top contenders for the striker role in the U.S. men's national team. But right now, this could tell us a lot about what Pochettino is starting to think about for the striker position because we have Patrick Ajamong, we have Bulligan, we have Ricardo Pepi, we have Pulisic, and we have Weah, and Brandon Aronson. Now, not all these are going to be the strikers. Right now, if I'm to guess, I would say Ajamong, Bulligan, and Pepi, and maybe Pulisic are going to be contending for that striker role. I would say probably Ajamong and Bulligan are probably going to be at the top of that list, maybe Weah. But that is just so interesting to see that Haji Wright is not in there despite his good form right now and despite Coventry City's good form. Uh, overall, this is a rather solid squad. I just think we're seeing now what the striker role is going to look like because that was a big question mark heading into the last couple of this last international break for the World Cup. And I think Mauricio Pochettino just showed us that Haji Wright is not in his plans right now, potentially for the World Cup, which is huge considering US doesn't have a ton of depth at striker. So I'm really fascinated to see how this goes. The thoughts on the US kits, real quick. I love the American stripes, and it reminds me of the Stoke City kits, except the Stokes is vertical, US is horizontal, and they're both wavy stripe type concepts. I like it, but also I want to see it on the pitch. I can't wait to see what the friendly against Belgium looks like. I think they're going to wear those then, maybe. So that's going to be fascinating to see. I do like the black kits. Again, I want to see these in person, but black is always a good choice for a soccer kit. It's always it's fun to see those kind of kits, and I wanna see it on the field before really judging it, but I'm kind of excited to see what it'll look like as well. We got some really cool kit as well from France, Statue of Liberty type kit, and I thought those were really, really cool as well. So I'm really excited to see where this what these kits look like for the World Cup. Lots of nations are really, really falling out for this World Cup, and I love seeing these kit ideas there and the kits that are coming out for the countries. All right, this is where the smartest or wildest questions and takes in football come from you, where you take the mic. Welcome to the Pitchback, y'all. It's another episode with another Pitchback segment. Let's dive in, see what you've got for us today. And at Cheese and Bear Pod asked us to rank the NFC North quarterbacks. So right now, I think this is kind of straightforward for the top two. I've got Jared Goff at number one, Caleb Williams at number two. I think right now Goff is just a bit more cemented. He's just the better, more polished version of a quarterback right now. And Caleb, he's got some things to work on. He's really good, but I think he still has some things to work on. And right now, I kind of base this on who would I trust more. And right now, I kind of trust Goff a little bit more than Caleb Williams. But that's no slight on Caleb because he had an excellent year. I just want to see him back it up another year. I have Kyler next, actually. Kyler Murray, if he is to start, if he's the starting quarterback for Minnesota, I would put him there at third. I just trust him a little bit more. Uh, Jordan Love, I have at four, just because last season was rather disappointing. I didn't see a ton that I really could trust, and it felt like he kind of took a step back after a couple of solid years. So right now, I probably would pick Kyler third, just because in a system where he is set to succeed, I think Kyler could do a lot of good things. And he's set up to succeed with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones. And now, if this was JJ McCarthy, I would probably put Love at three and McCarthy at four. But right now, if it's Kyler, and I'm assuming it is, considering they signed him to a vet minimum deal. I'm probably going to go Kyler. I'm just going to go Kyler as the starter and put him at three. Good question, y'all. At Three Guys, Six Balls podcast asked us, do you think the NFL will reach an agreement with the refs or will we have replacement refs? Right now, based on the statements we're getting, if we were just to base it right now on it, no. But I think we have a ton of time left before something concrete happens. And I honestly wouldn't be shocked if we get something locked down, considering how things can work so quickly. But at the same time, with all these rule changes and such, taking into consideration that there will be replacement refs, I would not be shocked that this is the league saying we're probably going to have replacement refs for a bit and signaling to us fans that there's going to be some changes until they can get the CBA locked down. So yeah, I think we probably might see replacement refs for the first few weeks, like we did in 2012. It would be interesting, but kind of unfortunate, I think, because we might get some crazy shenanigans once again, like we did in 2012. At G Brown Hollister on X or Twitter said we, the Chiefs, need to trade back into the teens and pick up an extra pick in the 40s or 50s. We still have a good shot at picking up Sadiq. I think that Sadiq is a game changer. We also need to get an edge and a defensive back. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if we need to trade back per se. We could, absolutely, and it wouldn't be a bad option either. I do think the Chiefs do have a need at, like you said, an edge or defensive back. There is that need. Why not get a Mansour Delane if you really wanted a cornerback or a defensive back? You could get him at number 9, potentially, and that would be, I think, a rather good pick there at number 9. I think it really just depends how the board falls. If, let's just say, Bain and Cardell Tate and Mansour Delaney are all gone, maybe even Caleb Downs, I think maybe the Chiefs do trade down. But I think the Chiefs are in such a great position of strength, they could absolutely they could absolutely pick someone and pick best player available, and I wouldn't be upset if I was a Chiefs fan. And they have pick 29 as well, and Shadiq, you mentioned Shadiq a couple of times here. You have a good shot at picking him. 9 is a little too high, I think, for Shadiq. 29 might be a perfect area for you to pick him up, but at the same time, I think if you were to address edge early, you could pick up Shadiq at 29. I would prefer Stowers if I'm a Chiefs fan. I think he fits more the Kelsey role. He's, you know, he's much more of a versatile athlete, like Kelsey was in his prime. Shadiq is very good, very athletic, yes, but he's much more your physical George Kittle type, and I think he doesn't fit as well into Andy Reid's system. So if I were the Chiefs, I would probably pick Stowers, but that's just me. Getting a tight end to replace Kelsey is always going to be something talked about every year with the Chiefs, and honestly, they probably should pick it this year. There's a couple of great tight ends available. I wouldn't be shocked if the Chiefs traded down, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they just stayed put. But that's a great take and something that made me think a lot. At our Gudot 6490 asked, why do we, the Giants, suck so bad to this point? This is in all caps, by the way. At this point, it's just because you've had bad general manager, bad coaching, and bad roster management. I think that's pretty much a great summary. John Sheen, I don't trust him as a general manager. I really don't. You've brought in a lot of good players this free agency. The Giants, I think, are on the up if John Harbaugh can coach this team properly. They have some pieces to be excited about. Cam Scatabo is coming back at the start of the season, so that's going to be promising for the run game. Now you do need to address receiver, I think, and a couple areas. You lost Wandale Robinson. That's a huge loss for Jackson Dart. He loved Wandale Robinson, but still, overall, I think it comes down to poor roster management, poor roster building, bad coaching, and just the players in general that you were picking and picking up were not great, and they just didn't gel together. So, in short, I think that's kind of the reason why the Giants suck so much. And with that, that's it for this episode of the Pitch Grid, where football meets perspective. If you're watching on YouTube, like, hit that bell, and subscribe to plug into the grid. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, drop a follow or rating. It helps more than you think. We'll be back soon with more insight, more thoughtful debates, and probably more chaos. Until next time, y'all, stay sharp.